Peace and greetings. Doing this post today based upon the theme of listening, and I'm going to delve into that. But first, I want to give a little backstory on the reason, what prompted me to do this post. In doing the observation of just the goings on in this country as well as the world as it relates to George Floyd's killing, as well as Breonna Taylor and Brother Ahmaud, it became apparent that there are just multiple forces happening, but around the central theme of we have a moment. Let's capture this moment to make the movement to finally address racism. And we need to have this dialogue amongst the people so that we can finally realize, or this country can finally realize and manifest the tenets in which it verbally, or at least orally and written, verbally is orally, written on about being great. And I said, okay, this is cool. And then simultaneously, I saw different dynamics working, and many of you probably have seen the same thing. So on one level, you have the allies who are coming out and they're being called allies, those who are protesting with and or for black people. Black Lives Matter. And they want to do, they're non-black. And I'll use those terms, although if you've heard me speak or write, I tend to go with actual fact, which is African or European or Asian. But for the purposes of this post, we're going to use the terminology that everyone or most people use. So you have the non-blacks who are marching with blacks, but for the most part, and I'm talking about the peaceful protests, I'm not talking about those who are taking advantage of the situation to riot and loot and so on and so forth. But the non-blacks who are saying, look, we are with you, we're tired of it also, and we want to be the allies. What can we do? We need to have this we need to have conversations. And I've read posts and talked to individuals who are non-black, who are even talking to their own homogeneous people in reference to what we need to do as, quote, white people or Asian people or so on. Then I'm seeing the tribe, like I said, tribe up. I'm seeing those who are in law enforcement who do not condone or did not condone what Officer Chauvin did to George Floyd, but yet they're now being disrespected by the media, by protesters, as well as one of my families who is officer, legislator, as they posted. And then on the other side, on another side, I've read those blacks who are very skeptical of the allies and saying, look, I've seen a post where they're like, hey, they should be treated like in the movie X with Denzel and Spike Lee. And when the white young lady walked up to Denzel and asked, I've been reading your work, so on and so forth, I want to help, what should I do? Nothing. And walked off. And I found that quite interesting because within that same post, it's like taken into a vacuum because, as we know, Malcolm X then made his Hajj, and then when he went to Mecca, he saw those who were Muslim of all ethnicities and nationalities. So he evolved into encompassing the human family. But again, I'm talking about tribed up. So with all these works happening, all these dynamics happening, I'm like, okay, if people are tribing up, people are skeptical, people want to help, we need to listen. And when I mean listen, I mean actively listen. And when I go further in terms of listening, I don't mean listening to solve. Because then that means, loosely speaking, that as the person is talking, you're trying to solve the problem for them. No. What we all need to do, if this is going to work, is to listen to understand. And just because you understand doesn't mean that you agree. But at least you understand where the other party is coming from. So my point in all of this is that as we sit down and dialogue and we want to make this a movement or a permanent change, all the different sides as we dialogue, actively listening to understand, and then as we do that, then we take the information that is said from all the different parties, take what is good, implement / incorporate that education so that then we can then manifest these tenets that periodically people speak on in reference to the United States of America, that we're the greatest country ever in civilization, and we have this opportunity with the various cultures coming together to manifest this greatness of all people, encompassing all people and all the contributions of everyone, not just the few, or highlighted that promotes the few. Because in order to address the racism, and I won't get into the technical definition of it, but in essence, what it is the promoting of the value system of one group of people. So if we're going to address it properly, then what needs to happen is we need to educate from the miseducation that all of us have been indoctrinated in order, and so we can read for those who are experts on how to address this and pull from there and from their works. But as of equal importance, what's going to happen is the daily interactions, meaning the listening. And I'm going to keep repeating that, the listening, the active listening to understand where the other person is coming from, where the other group or the other culture is coming from. And not inject the fact, for example, someone will say, well, look, we as black people have been facing this racial atrocity for over 400 years. And then someone will say, well, hey, the Irish, when they came over, they faced hell, and the Italians, that's not the time for that. You're not actively listening. If you want to have a conversation about Irish and Italian, you do that after the conversation that is present, which is in reference to black people. Because then the comeback or the clapback, however you want to call it, will then say, well, talk to me when Irish people have faced 400 years of atrocity, lynching, Jim Crow, redlining, so on and so forth in this country, and still catching hell in this country, and then we can have a conversation. So now what has happened then is now we're all focused. And then everybody goes, those two parties, if it was two people or multiple people having this conversation, will then go back to their tribes and tribe up. So if this is actually going to be a movement from this moment, which we have an opportunity to do something with this, with the education, which like I said, can be academically. And when I say academically, I don't mean what is current. What I mean is the infusion of all the cultures that help to have made this country to where we are here today. Because this is not so-called a coincidence. Like, how did we get here in 2020? Or I've heard people say, this is 2020. How is it that we are still here facing this problem? We're facing this problem because the truth hasn't been told. And people have tribed up and told versions of the truth. So people tend to ask me, and I'm digressing for a moment, well, Greg, what is it that, whose side are you on? One side has to be right, one side has to be wrong. That's that linear thinking. I'm a holistic spiritual person. And what I tell them is quite easy for me. I seek the truth. And then I side with the truth. And then I observe who's down with the truth, regardless to whom or what. It's not about the skin in reference to truth, or the hue, if you will. It's about the truth. And that would be my suggestion to another suggestion to everyone. Seek the truth and side with the truth. And then those who aren't down with the truth, then you have a choice. You either be down with them or not. But the truth is simple. It's the manifestation of your actions, which then people get convoluted and then it becomes complex. So going back and wrapping up on what I'm saying is that we need to listen actively for understanding. With that understanding, take the information, make it education so that it can be implemented to then address and eliminate the bigotry and racism. Now people will say, hey, that's never going to happen. Well, the mind is powerful. If you say never is not going to happen, then it won't happen. But if you do the steps to eradicate it, then it is happening. So it's however you want to utilize your mind. Next, we then utilize policies and change the system from within the system. So I have people that are like, you can't change the system. It's not going to happen. These people aren't going to give it up, so on and so forth. And there's validity in that. But within it, again, I've said it before in other posts, the art of war. Sun Tzu, read it. Mind is very powerful. Conceive it, achieve it. Those who govern understand that, so they get your mind to believe in something, and then you put faith behind it, and then you will manifest it. But if you don't truly understand the connection of the spirit, mind, and body from the source meaning God, Allah, Jehovah, call it the universe, the creator, the great I am, many names, same source. If you're in tune with that, then anything that your mind conceives, it can achieve. Period. So, Hotep, be safe, be well. If you're about making the movement and making the change, start with yourself. You be the change that you want to see. Then the world around you starts to change. And then as each individual does the same thing, then everything has changed. Because prior to the killing of George Floyd, no one would have thought all of these things would have been, the protesting across the country and the world would have taken place. No one would have thought the various things that have happened within the time since the video has come out of him being killed would have taken place, but it has. So we can continue it. Hotep.